Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening. Normally, you see all religions, proper religions, are religious cults, impress on one quality that is being useful. They tell the people, the acolytes, the followers to be useful to themselves, to society, and to God. But Daoism is a multi-faceted religio-philosophical tradition. And curiously, this combines statecraft, which is not a part of religion, with basic principles. And one of the principles which has amazed the people and attracted people all over who are students of the comparative religion are being useless. Being useless, according to Daoist philosophy, is an important ingredient of being alive. Now, this philosophy, or rather, shall I call it religio-philosophy, this tradition has shaped the life of the people in China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, parts of Thailand, Japan, and to some extent Philippines, the whole of East Asia, as a matter of fact, for more than 2000 years. And in the broader sense, a Taoist attitude towards life can be seen as acceptance and yielding. Now, as far as accepting and yielding is concerned, this is a part of practically every religion. They say whatever God does, accept it. But along with that is the joyful and carefree side of character. Now, being carefree is something which no religion except Daoism preaches. It's an attitude that offsets and complements the moral and the duty conscious, austere, purposeful character, which is typical of Confucianism. So basically, Confucius philosophy and Daoist philosophy are complementary if they are not diametrically opposed. Then Daoism is also characterized, let's not forget, by a positive attitude towards metaphysics, wherever agnostic, pragmatic Confucius thought considered these issues to be of marginal value. The reality is that these issues, which are denied by Confucius, are extremely important and relevant. Strictly defined, Daoism includes ideas and attitudes peculiar to Laozi. Now, Laozi is a classic way of power. Here is where the statecraft comes in. And interwoven in this statecraft is an attitude of being useless. Laozi, Zhuazi, and relating writings. These are the concepts which underlie Daoist religion. And Daoist thought permeates, as I said earlier, the East Asian culture. And many aspects usually not considered Daoist are in fact part of Daoist tradition. It's a folk tradition, essentially it's a folk tradition and has been more popular and spontaneous than the officially sponsored Confucius thought. Originally, it was meant as a handbook for the ruler, the way Kautilya wrote Arthashastra, Plato wrote Republic. So these were basically, or Machiavelli wrote The Prince. These were basically the handbooks for the ruler. And according to this Daoist philosophy, rulers should be a sage whose actions pass so unnoticed that his very existence remains unknown. So here, usefulness is, as a matter of fact, a part not of being useless, but as a part of non-entity. The ideal king would impose no restriction or prohibition on his subjects. So long as they love quietude, the people will themselves go straight. And so long as they act only by inactivity, the people will make themselves prosperous. So the governance, least governed is the best governed, that concept. So the king should become useless so that the people become useful. The simplicity of the rule makes the 10,000 things passionless and state. Now, this thought normally is above the rules want to intrude in every part of life. And here, Daoist philosophy says that the rule should not discriminate between virtue and ambition. And then, a very interesting sentence comes up. When intellect emerges, the great artifices begin. And when discourse is rife in the families, dutiful sons appear. So, discord is important. And when the state falls into anarchy, the loyal subjects would appear. So, basically, it is a process of a natural selection, it's an evolution. You are in anarchy, and somebody will emerge to take charge. So, thus, the conclusion of that statecraft is it's better to banish wisdom, better to banish righteousness, ingenuity, and the people will benefit a hundredfold. Now, the philosophy is UV. UV is an ideal of absolute inaction, which is being useless, and not mere not overdoing. Now, there's a difference between doing, underdoing, overdoing. He says, no, neither do, not underdo, nor overdo, but don't do. Absolute inaction. So, actions are in accordance with the things that their authors leave no trace of themselves in the work. So, when the things are going on naturally, the person who's performing the act should in fact become invisible. It should appear that the things are happening naturally without being imposed. And you would have seen when the things just happen without being imposed, people accept it. So, perfect inactivity would leave no track. Perfect speech is like a jade worker. Now, this is a sentence which I love. Perfect speech is like a jade worker whose tool leaves no mark. So it's a Dawes philosophy. Never acts, yet there's nothing it does not do. So do things without action. That means act but without being visible. Appear to be useless. And in that appearance should hide the fact that you are doing something great. And then the Dawes philosophy goes further. No true achievement without movie is possible in the natural course of things. Now, let's come to the comparative times, the contemporary times rather. Utility or usefulness is a threat. It's an invisible threat, but runs through every individual, every family, every business, every organization, every government, every aspect of our society. Is it useful? Is it desirable? Is it appropriate? All these adjectives underlie all action. Usefulness is basic, universal, inescapable measure of everything and every action in our modern life. And this principle really has undermined the individual who is supposedly to be at the heart of society. And our obsession with productivity works against us. And that's why now there's a concept of going for the forest path, connect to the nature. Now, when you go to the forest, hug the trees, you're not doing anything useful as far as the society is concerned, but you're doing something useful for yourself. but that utility is not visible. So the purpose is not to become a parasite. Now, let's be very clear. Daoism doesn't support parasitism. It says be useless visibly. So our attitude of work, education has to change. Economics treats utility as a measurable quantity which serves, dictates, and ultimately modulates all decision making. Academics, particularly in sciences, need to justify the results. Daoism says that no action needs to be justified, and the justification in terms of impact of quantifiable indicator of economics or social contribution is in fact contrary to the living life principle, that is, do your job quietly and make an exit. Now imagine when we look at the modern indicators of the economics, we find that the governments are now acting the other way. Recently, US and UK cut down their funding for the liberal arts subject because teaching of literature, for example, has no obvious measurable use. On the other hand, it's literature which makes a person really good. But since it's not quantifiable, so okay, cut off these resources. Even beyond work, let's leave the work aside, which is the economic base. Leisure is presented as a means to recharge our bodies and minds so we can keep on working. And that is turned into a commodity that is bought and sold, marketed. Tourism industry. Now that's a working, it's leisure basically. But it has been converted into work. So if the people were earlier going on pilgrimages, they were doing of their own free will and nobody was gaining out of that. Now it become an economic activity. The recent pandemic destroyed the tourism industry, the hotel industry, and so on. So Daoism says that the moment you turn any action which should be instinctive into an economic activity, it's fraught with danger because the moment you start it as an economic activity, then one element enters. That's the element of profit making. Profit making makes you selfish. Selfishness breeds other bad qualities, including the quality of being unjust, quality of trying to take advantage of others, quality of being deceitful and dishonest. And that repercussion on the moral discourse implies being useful equals being bad. Anything without use value nowadays, according to us, we treat as luxury, as indulgence, or we treat it as a laziness and moral complacency. Daoism says no. As a matter of fact, the morality is not doing something which has economic parameters. Now, this is a very curious and very paradoxical statement. We in the modern age cannot think of anything which does not have an economic base. But Daoism says the moment you do it, you are going against the fact of being what you are, a Homo sapien. And utility as an approach to life has basically a historical foundation in the Protestant work ethic. Now imagine, here's something very curious happens. If you look at all the major religions of the world, the 100% of the religions originated in Asia and Middle East. Abrahamic religions, that is, Jews, Islam, Christianity, They originated from present-day Israel and Palestine and Saudi Arabia. They are part of the Middle East. And all other religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism in India, Confucianism, and Daoism in China, Daoist in Korea, developed in China, Zen in Japan. So the approach to life fundamentally has been different in the West and the East. The West, protesting ethics, was basically the base for the spirit of capitalism. And that's why sociologist Max Weber says that utility as an approach to life has a historical foundation in Protestant work ethic. It was not a part of the Eastern philosophy ever. And can you believe the Hindu Varnas, for example, the last stage is Vanprasth, the third is sannyas, take, move away, detachment, and the last is going to the forest. Now, that philosophy of Banvas and Vanprasth has been converted by Daoist philosophy into a part of life that is present today. He says, why wait for 50 years? Even today, do not take an action which has a materialistic tint. And if you really take utility as the only meaningful values, then what happens? Your lives were merely parts of a never ending production line. You function as long as you lost, but then you are replaced. This is represented as progress. But then you may arrive at a utopia of economics. You may arrive at the apex of the technological advancement. You may understand that this is actually a myth of modernity, a distant and never realized progress. So, going back to the lesson of the ancient Daoism might help us limit our modern contemporary fixation with usefulness. Now, very interesting thing, how does Daoist philosophy explain the concept of uselessness? It tells a story in a parable. The way, in India we have Jatka tales and Panchtantra tales. We have Arabian Nights. Here, Daoist philosopher Jungbansi tells the story of a tree which enjoys being useless. The tree has grown to a vast size and is worshipped in the village. The branches are twisted and cannot be used as pillars. You can't cut them, make furniture of them. The trunk is splashed and split. It cannot even be used as a coffin. So one day, a carpenter encounters a tree and believes the tree to be worthless lumber. And he says, okay, let me not cut the tree. So he goes away. And then the night he dreams, and the tree asks him, why do you want to compare me to the cultivated trees which are useful? Hawthorn, pear, orange, all the fruit trees and shrubs. When that fruit is ripe, you pluck the fruit. And that is, according to me, an insult. And you thought me to be useless. But have you seen one thing? Those trees which bear fruit, their fruits are plucked. Nobody comes and plucks my fruit because I have no fruit. Then those trees are pruned. Nobody is going to prune me. And nobody is going to cut me. So I live on being useless. And the useful trees die. Because they die young, they batter themselves with vulgar convention. Now, this story, the carpenter view, is a modern Western term utility. Regardless of the size of the tree, the To the carpenter, a tree is nothing more than a waste of space. The existence of tree has no purpose. However, the tree feels blessed by its uselessness. It survives while other useful trees are cut. Now, this is basically the parable which tells that your life does not depend, your happiness, your joy, your bliss does not depend on being useful, but it depends on being, just being. The tree is saved by being useless. The fallow trees are destroyed because they are useful. So, Jugansi says that usefulness in the tree has to be cultivated. And that concept continues. And in the parable, again, this is, I'm quoting from the parable, this is the worthlessness, uselessness that the spirit man has relied on. And he refers to spirit man both as an external figure and as an example that can inspire all of us. The tree, like the way is, resembles the spirit of man. It is something we should follow. So Jugansi develops the cultivation of usefulness to two key emotions, we, and Zira. And these are the two Daoist philosophy basics. Zizi, we is basically an actionless action. Now in Mahabharata and in Gita, Krishna says, take action but do not worry about the results. That is in fact actionless action. You are taking an action, you're not bothered with the results. The material benefit doesn't come in. So the Daoist philosopher Laozi says that the principles of the governor says, again, conduct affairs on the principle of take no action. That being, in a modern way, that if the president takes no action, he'll be deemed useless. On the surface, this principle might appear as an excuse for laziness, passivity, inaction. And Jugansi further develops it to be more accurate to call it, and he calls it let things be, let beings be. As an ethical principle, actionless actions require you not to force your will or impose utility onto others. The other principle, Ziran, as I was talking, is to understand naturalness, spontaneity. An entity is said to be Ziran if it's allowed to be itself. Now, when you're working, you're not yourself. You are modulated according to the conventions, according to the needs. And this thus calls for us to allow both ourselves and other beings to be. So the philosophy presents the figure of spirit man, the Daoist sage, who is associated with the approach to life of the useless tree. And is presented as an eccentric figure to the modern world. But precisely this eccentricity, thought by many to be useless, may not fit the convention of the modern society. But it shows the free spirit, the same spirit, which and Rin talks about in Atlas Shrugged. So Juganzi considers the uselessness to be a part of play in life. And you cannot do that till you are useless from the modern point of view. The people who practice yoga live out of the original nature before it was tempered by the knowledge and restricted by morality. Now, morality is a binding thing according to Daoist philosophy. He said there's nothing as morality. If it's spontaneity which is more important than morality. And that is society that carves shape for its own use and robs the individual place of the original totality. That robbing of the individuality and the initiative is basically objected to by the Daoist philosophy, which preaches uselessness. And then there's maybe no hope for ever changing the way we think of utility. This story of a useless tree at the best helps to discover a place for uselessness. It presents basically an alternative way to think of freedom. I'm not talking of absolute inactivity, I'm not talking of inertia. This is just an alternative way to think of freedom. You have to stop feeling that we have to be useful all the time. And then there's no more life than utility. No. What those reflection is that you need to challenge the destructive aspects of the trinity of utility, which is present in the contemporary culture, and just be yourself. Just be human. Just be individuals, devoid of all pretensions, all immoralities, all corruptions that are part of assumed commercial culture. Thank you.